Welcome to T-Smack, home of the T-Smack. May I take your order?
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, and comics. I'm your host, Josh Scar, and joining me this week is the one, the only, the bearded Matt. Matt, welcome back.
Yeah, glad to be here. How you doing?
I choked on some spit about like 30 minutes ago, so my throat is still really tight.
Okay.
I'm hoping to loosen that up here while we talk to one of my favorite people, not just you.
Most of the
but we
time,
have,
before you get
another-
into that, most of the time people just say, I'm doing good.
Well, I mean, I have to explain my throat and everything,
Okay,
and like how
all
I
right.
sound. I might sound really different I feel like I'm doing all right now,
Well, good,
but you
good.
never know. And yeah. So we are joined by a third here. One of my favorite people. You know him from the Voluntary Input podcast, as well as we talk about him every week because he's the man who helped create our theme music. We are joined by the beautiful Leo Allen. Leo, welcome to the show.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah, look
that-
at that beautiful face. Look at that beautiful face that no one else can see but us.
I'll tell you what's funny, the choking on the spit. You know how when you go to work, or we talk about this all the time when people say, hey, how are you doing? And people always get that generic answer of, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, right.
But no one ever wants to hear how you're really doing. Now I'm
Exactly.
going to say, I was choking on some spit, but now I'm fine. I'm going to start using that.
Then everyone's gonna be like, I'm never asking
Yeah.
that question.
Yeah,
again.
good way to get
Never
again. We'll stop asking.
How do you choke on spit?
I wish I knew, but it happens like at least twice a week for me.
Wow.
This is the whole episode now.
Usually stuff like that, people say you need more fiber in your life or something, but I don't know what do you do for that? I don't know.
Yeah, let's
Just get some like cotton swabs in there, just dry out my mouth. I don't know.
let's do a dietary breakdown. Try and figure this out instead of what we were going to talk about.
Matt, we've known each other for 20 years. You know my diet. It's chicken nuggets, pizza, hamburgers, and Pizza Hut breadsticks.
Man, you are
Oh, there it
married
is.
with several kids that cannot still be what you're eating.
No, I've branched out. We have like homemade burgers now. It's not just Culver's burgers. And
We are in our late 30s. You got
I'm
to start
entering
eating better.
30s.
You mean the Culver's peanut butter and jelly burger?
I have
Oh,
not
you
heard
haven't
of that,
heard
but
about this.
I can't have it because I'm allergic to peanuts. So
Oh, okay.
That's Josh's burger when he's finally ready to.
When it's all said and done.
Yeah, he's like, you know what?
Give me the peanut butter and jelly burger.
It's time for
I'm
me to.
out.
I'm ready to go.
we're putting the dog down, so we're going to give him a chocolate cake kind of ending there. I'd rather just have the chocolate cake if I'm honest.
Oh man, I hope you're eating better than that these days.
Yes, I am. Ricky's making sure that I am eating better, but I still have my go-tos because I'm
get it.
a child.
I get it.
Oh, I'm a child every Friday. I mean, we just had pizza and wings, and I had a sub. Yeah, it's every Friday with me and
All right.
me and the kids. So
I was
Hey.
just in Phoenix with some people that I travel the country with for my job, and we ended up eating at the Arizona Diamondbacks baseball stadium. They have a restaurant in the upper decks, and it's like this is going to sound really weird and hit oxymoronical or contradictory, but it's like a high-end Applebee's, like really good quality food, but it serves similar stuff to what Applebee's would have on their menu. And we ended up eating there twice, and one of the guys that's with us that goes around, he's Mr. Variety. Like if we go to an American place, he needs to go to a sushi place, an Indian place, a Mexican place, somewhere at the next day. Like he wants to have a variety, and
I'm that guy, by the way. Yeah.
I'm fine with that. But I also, if I'm just like out and about, I just want to get something that I know I will eat. And so like being adventurous like that, that's not me. And he was just really upset that we ended up eating at the same place 2 days in a row.
Let's get him on the show and talk about it.
Yeah. And not to segue that conversation, is that a thing that's going on with baseball stadiums lately? Because I'm in Cincinnati and they keep talking about on our news, the Reds have hired a new chef and they keep highlighting all these new meals that are available at the ballpark. Is that like a new thing in MLB? Like everybody's getting chefs and new menus, or
Well, I know the Brewers had a TGI Fridays in their outfield for a long time. I don't know if they still do.
in the outfield?
In the outfield, yeah.
Wow.
And is like right under the slide where Bernie slides around.
Well,
And
on
I
the-
think that's the misunderstanding, because I know you can't just go get the chef's meals.
yeah, right.
Just by
Yeah.
standing up in line. You have to be in the box at least.
Mhm.
So
yeah, that's
Well,
oh
like-
yeah, oh the
Yeah.
boxes. Yeah, I'm sure there's
The Cubs
The
have
White
like an
Sox-
entire neighborhood outside outside of their stadium where it's like the whole, like, you know, you want a fancy restaurant, you're going out of the park as opposed to putting something
Right.
in.
Wrigleyville is they're industrializing the heck out of that, which we're going to talk about industrialization, but not in baseball, rather in movies. But but first, we're going to hear from our friends over at the Doom Generation. So if you're still with us after that riveting conversation, we will be right back.
Who wouldn't be?
and I love the Doom generation, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Tesla.
Hey, you!
Want to get doomed?
I'm Tessa.
And I'm Nicole, and we have a spanking new podcast for your ear holes called Doom Generation.
Listen in as two foul-mouthed biddies have an always casual, often comedic,
What? I think we're funny.
and sometimes chaotic conversation about the things that doomed us to be who we are today.
Take a trip with us down nostalgia lane, and we'll try not to veer off the road.
Available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Doom Generation Pod, and on Twitter at DoomGen Pod.
Later, Doomers!
Now, Leo, did you make their background music as well, or is that just generated that they found? Because that rips in the background there too.
That wasn't me. I'm sure they got a whole new thing going on out there in California. But those girls, those are my sisters from another mister. I love Doom Generation.
They're
I'm
a
just
whole
gonna
mess
put
of
that
fun.
out there in the ether. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're a whole mess of fun. I love their they have a great viral campaign with all their episodes, and I think we need to reach out to them and talk about their promo, because are they still new? I was thinking
No.
about that as we were listening to it. They're not really
Haven't been new for a
anymore.
while.
You're always new
Yeah.
to somebody.
It's true. That's fair.
true. Yeah.
But
And it's
yeah.
funny, they say some things where I just want to call in and scream at them sometimes, because man, but in the long run, I love them. They have a great show.
Oh yeah.
Love
Yeah,
that show.
it's a whole lot of fun. They deserve everything they get from the success of that show. They just hit like 20,000 listens, I think, or 20,000
Wow, yeah.
downloads, which I don't think they've really been running for a full year yet, or maybe just over a year.
I think they're on year 2.
Yeah,
And they're
they're still-
high as a mother. Okay, but go ahead.
But yeah, we're getting sidetracked here. We
Yep.
are here to talk about franchise fatigue, which just to talk about the franchise in the room. I understand that we are in the middle of a big franchise sandwich as this episode comes out. We will have covered Star Wars Celebration, Mandalorian Season 3, Power Rangers, Guardians of the Galaxy, and then next week maybe we're going to be talking about Fast 10, The Little Mermaid after that, and Spider-Verse 2. So like I understand that there's potential for people being like, what a bunch of hypocrites. That's not really what we're trying to do here today. We're just going to have a conversation about certain things, especially a fun little tick that I know about Leo. But there is something going on in
Yep.
Hollywood.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, you know, at the time that we're recording this, which is, you know, mid-April to pin us, it's just a conversation that's happening and it's worth discussing, right? Whether
Yeah,
we agree with it
it's-
or not, it's going around.
We just had Star Wars Celebration, and we're getting more Star Wars, and they're talking about more movies, which is a pitfall that they had earlier, which is something I do want to talk about as we get into this. And I also recognize the irony that I am wearing a Star Wars shirt today.
Nobody knows
Not
that.
that anyone else can
Nobody
see
knew
it.
that.
I'm going to hurt some. And by the way, I'm going to hurt some feelings tonight about Star Wars. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there, because I'm going to hurt
They
some
might be
feelings.
mine. Well,
I'm going to make some enemies, and I'm going to hurt some feelings.
it might be.
I
It
think
might
as
be
long as
me.
you don't.
That might be
And you
me.
mentioned that you mentioned that Fast franchise. That is a quintessential modern example of how I feel about franchise
yes.
fatigue.
That's one that I'm definitely like, this can go away now.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
it's mindless fun, but it's mindless fun
Is
that
it-
I don't
is it
need in my life
fun?
anymore.
Is
It
it
can
fun?
be if you if you see it with the right people and the right frame of mind, maybe,
No.
or
No. We might as well just dive right in. We'll start
Yeah.
with that. You want to start with that?
Sure. Well, let's start with the fact that you have this interesting interest. I don't even know how to phrase it now. I'm losing my
philosophy.
frame of yes, a philosophy. You have this great philosophy of sequels in Hollywood. So please enlighten us on this.
My philosophy for many years, for decades, has always been a good story only needs to be told once. And you start making sequels, you're repeating the same story over and over again, and you're trying to quote unquote make it better, then apparently you didn't have a good story to begin with. But the bottom line is a good story only needs to be told once. And what's wrong with a cliffhanger? What's wrong with, I feel like society got away from, I used to love this when someone tells a really, really good story and then they kind of end it without an ending. And you're like, wow. And you're just left to your imagination. It's like nothing is left to the imagination anymore because everyone piles sequels on top of everything to explain everything away. And then when they do that, all it does is cheapen the story and it becomes a cash grab.
That's an interesting perspective, if only because we were just talking about Star Wars, right? And I think we're going to end up talking about stuff a lot in the modern, like what's happening right now. But like Star Wars is a great example of this kind of thing that they've been doing forever, like well before Disney, for years, right? Where like so much of the stuff that is built up around Star Wars is about filling in every possible narrative gap, right? Where like first it was the novels, then it was the prequels, and then it's the cartoons, and then whatever else. For better or worse, it's like, there's a time in the Star Wars novels where it's like everyone's got a story, and that story needs to be told. And also, by the way, they're all super important, and they all hung out with Han Solo,
Well, here's the the interesting advantage, if you will, that Star Wars has. Star Wars was written from an infinite universe perspective. It infinite. The galaxy in and of itself is almost infinite, and then you add to that. Well, there's other beings from other galaxies that also visited and worked alongside of this galaxy far, far away a long, long time ago. So the possibilities are almost limited. So in that case, I can give that franchise a pass. But when you come to things like the Fast and the Furious, you only have so much to work with.
Right.
Yep.
Now you're just being ridiculous. It gets to the point where, first of all, none of those cars do any of those things that you have them doing.
Well, they're basically
None of those
superhero movies
people-
now, right?
Yeah, but it
yeah.
becomes so, it's just cheap. And for the record, I really enjoyed the first Fast and Furious movie. And that's always my, this has always been my basis of my somewhat hatred, or I don't want to say hatred because I don't hate just a strong dislike of sequels and franchise stretching, if I could speak. The Fast and Furious is a perfect example of it. The first one was great. It ended great. Leave it alone. How many are there now?
There's 10, 11 maybe.
10, and then there's like
depending
at
on-
least one or two spin-offs, if you want to count that are like Fast and Furious
Why?
presents this movie.
Why? What else is there to say? That's my point.
James Bond and the Marvel is modernly mostly to blame, but like James Bond is one of those where I do feel like it can kind of get away with what you're talking about, where it's like one story is all you need to tell with this person, where James Bond is never, until the Daniel Craig movies, and even then it's not entirely true, where James Bond is kind of just this blank shell of a character going through the motions that you can kind of just put yourself into their shoes and be like, yeah,
But do
James
people
Bond is so
really
cool.
remember the history of James Bond?
There
and
are
the
quite
old
a few
books?
people.
Yeah, and it was meant to be that. And it was meant to be kind of this over the top spy thing. So again, I can kind of give that a pass. When I was a kid, I'm from the Roger Moore era, which most people don't like, but I liked Roger Moore as James Bond. I know I liked Sean Connery too, but I grew up, the movies I saw when they were new were the Roger Moore James Bond movies, if you will.
Mhm.
And even as a kid, I thought, wow, this is so over the top ridiculous, but it's interesting at least.
Yeah.
And I knew it was based on some books that some, people were writing. It started off as one original author, but it was intended to be built upon. So,
Right.
hey, I get that. So I can give that a pass. And even with Star Wars, like I said, it was written as an infinite universe.
Yeah,
So
and I think
that's fine.
I think what I was getting
And
at, just to clarify what myself, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the things I love about Star Wars, right? But I think a lot of times it sort of leans toward, in practice, you see writers who are like, oh, I have a question about that. Let me explain that, even though it's something that doesn't need to be explained, right? Where like a recent example is Rogue One, which I think is a movie I really like, but is a movie that is like at least partially concerned with explaining the port on the Death Star, right? Which is not a thing that needs explanation whatsoever. So it's like there's this huge, vast galaxy, this perfect setting to tell all kinds of stories that don't have anything to do with Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, whatever. And this story that we're telling, you decided this was a plot hole that needed to be filled, and you're pouring the whatever into it.
Well, I have to say, I loved Rogue One.
Yes.
Because I believe it was the perfect story that needed to be told, because we all knew the rebels, the Empire. But how did that all start?
Sure.
That was Rogue One for me.
And not to go off on a huge tangent, but I love Rogue One. I do think of the modern Star Wars movies, like that's the best one.
That movie rules, to be clear.
Absolutely.
There's like just that one piece that I'm criticizing.
Yeah, but
I'm home. I've said the same thing ever since it came out. This is the best one of the new ones.
Yeah, we didn't need them to explain away the exhaust port that led to the reactor core. Like you could literally just
I think
be
that
like,
was for people who may not have been familiar with what was going on.
Yeah, but I think you could have easily just said it's hubris. Like we have studied this thing after Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor have sacrificed themselves to get it to us. We have studied this and we have found that this is a flaw in their design, something they didn't catch because whatever. And they even go out of their way to say that with her dad, with Jyn's dad, where he's like, it's a minuscule design flaw that I've created, like
On
intentionally. Like you don't need that, really. You can just say the hubris of the Empire.
I like that touch that he did it on purpose, though. I did like that. I like that touch that he did it on purpose. I think that his
own little act of rebellion.
But I do think that's a great example of like, that's not a story that I think it kind of falls into what I was talking about, but it's a story that is like it's not something that, I don't know what I'm getting at. It's a story that feels like it was not begging to be told. It's not like they wrote Star Wars and everyone was like, how'd they get the plans? But it's a movie where like someone realizes, oh, there is an interesting story to tell there, so let's tell it. And then I think to expand that, you see that a little bit with recently Andor.
Matt, I think you're talking about Han Solo. I think that's the movie you're talking about.
You weren't concerned about how he got his blaster and his blaster holster and his jacket.
I think
Han Solo is actually the perfect example of what I'm talking about, because that's a movie where like the second they announce it, the second they say we're gonna do a young Han Solo movie, you can just knowing how Star Wars works, knowing how big franchises worked in when did it come out? 2018, 2019? 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I could have said, okay, I know we're going to see this, and then I saw the movie, and like 9 out of 10 of those were on point. So then, what it has the effect of doing is taking Han Solo, who's this character in the movies, who's cool, and we like him, and he has this suggestion that he has all these cool adventures and this exciting life, and then Solo comes out, and Solo's a fun movie, but it's also like, oh, by the way, all that cool stuff he always talked about, it happened in one weekend.
And I think the problem was we didn't need to know because we already knew.
Right.
Like it was in all the movies.
Yeah.
I think the difference between Solo and Rogue One was there was a lot that we didn't know about the Rebels
Yeah.
that Rogue One helped, build into. Solo, he was so braggadocious anyway. And then we knew so much about him from all the movies that it was like, well, okay, we already know at least his own built up reputation. That's fine.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to make a whole movie about it.
Yeah.
Even though, like, I agree with you. It was entertaining, but it was kind of like, yeah, we know.
It feels like a movie that they made because they know people would go see a Han Solo movie more than, oh, here's a cool story that we realized we could tell in this universe.
Well, it felt like a movie, which was the original basis of this conversation that we're having. It felt like Disney said, let's add to the franchise and make some more money
right.
off of.
Yep.
Yeah, which once they bought the Star Wars license, they were like, yeah, Star Wars is going to be an annual thing, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit here, because one of the things that made Star Wars so special, especially in mine and Matt's youth in 1999, when The Phantom Menace came out, it was the first Star Wars movie in almost 20 years. And it was just incredible that we were getting new Star Wars. And it obviously, storytelling wise, it was not the greatest thing since Star Wars. But it was an event. And then 2 years later, we got another one, and we finished out the trilogy within like 6 years. And again, not the greatest thing ever, but it was still a big deal that we had this new Star Wars stuff. There was such a huge ad campaign for it. Mr. Sunday Movies has an amazing video based around the 1999 promotional period, 98 leading into 99, with like all the Pepsi cans and Pepsi product cans. And
I had every single one of those.
Mr. Sunday Movies actually drank one of those cans in the video after being sealed up for 20 years.
And then rest in peace.
And then he died.
Oh my gosh. Now you got to remember, I'm a little older. So for me, it was, I remember going to the theater to see A New Hope when it was new. And so by the time Phantom Menace rolled around, people of my generation, we were like, great, they're finally picking this up the right way. And then what a lot of people were disappointed about was, well, it was all gloss. It just seemed to be rushed. And a lot of things were kind of like, it just felt like a merchandise vehicle, which it ended up being, reputation wise. So it was like, why did they bother doing this? And so that only further fed my franchise fatigue. and don't get me wrong, I liked it. I was like, yeah, that's cool. It's a cool movie. I ended up liking what was the one that everyone seemed to hate? It wasn't
Attack
Phantom
of the
Menace.
Clones.
I liked Clones. And there was one more. I'll have to think about it. But I didn't hate all of those movies that came out during that time. But I felt they just were like, it was just like, yeah, they're just here so they can, make some money off of them. It
worked once for Boba Fett, so they might as well just make an entire business model off of it.
Let's do it again and again and again. So,
well, and some of that, it's tough because, like, I think that's undeniably true, but in a lot of ways, that's Star Wars, right? Where like the original Star Wars was the first huge toy line, which, is different because Star Wars itself, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, those are like...
Well, I'll counter that with Planet of the Apes, but you weren't
alive back then. Yeah, right. Okay. But, this was a period where, like, in 1977, they sold... Mm-hmm. You would give people vouchers for the action figures for Christmas because they were so in demand, right?
I'll tell it to you like this. I don't, a lot of people don't remember. And then this is just, it almost skipped your generation too. It used to be a movie would come out first.
Yeah.
If it was successful, then there was merchandise.
Yeah.
Then
right.
everyone ran to the merchandise.
Not-
Nowadays, it's promotion, merchandise, hype, viral videos on social media. Then the movie comes out.
right.
See, that's the exact opposite of what it
Yeah, and
used
you've
to be. It used
you've
to
already
be,
bought your Avengers T-shirt that has all the characters.
yeah,
from the
you're
movie.
already decked
Yeah.
out. You're going to the movies in the merchandise. It used to be the merchandise didn't come out until and unless the movie was successful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
yeah.
that's why you had all that Star Wars merchandise back in the 70s, was because it ended up being a successful movie. Then all the merchandise came out.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Now there was some stuff that came out first, but it wasn't as it's not like how it's done now.
it was very
where
different
the
landscape.
opposite
Yeah,
is true.
it was before
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah,
realized that you could do a huge multimedia push like that.
and like that's a
Right.
great point, because I've been seeing I mean, I have kids who eat Happy Meals plus me, so like even back in like December, I think McDonald's had Super Mario Brothers the movie toys in their Happy Meals almost 4 months before the movie comes out.
Right.
I'm seeing Miles Morales in Across the Spider-Verse merchandise everywhere right now.
And I
again,
still
we're-
can't get used to it. I am still not used to seeing that model of the merchandise comes out before the movie, and it's been this many years later.
Yeah,
I'm still
right.
like, wait, the movie ain't even out yet. You already have the toys.
Well, I think that's partly because they want to take advantage of the hype machine just in case the movie
Absolutely.
is bad.
Yep.
Because now all of a sudden you're stuck with that Jar Jar Binks popsicle that looked like you're French kissing him.
Well, yeah,
So,
and like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as far as the merchandise is concerned. It doesn't matter if Ant-Man is good or not. But people are excited about it beforehand, so maybe some kids will go and see Ant-Man on
But
the shelves and want to buy it.
But it really is about the money, though, because
Yeah.
you got to remember, for those people to even, there's all these different companies that make this merchandise. They have to pay a licensing fee to Disney to even make this merchandise. So even if the movie flops, Disney is still getting some coin,
Oh yeah, yep,
even before the movie comes out.
yeah. They get paid on the front end. Yeah,
Yeah. So
And then like Disney deserves all this ridicule and shade we're throwing at them, but like there are other franchises out there doing similar things and trying to emulate. One of the bigger offenders, we'll say, is probably Hasbro, with a lot of their attempts to try and create a shared universe, specifically in the the late 2000s, early 2010s, where they had the Transformers movies, and then there was rumors that they were going to try and work in the GI Joe franchise into that same universe to build like a Hasbro verse. And they even made like a Battleship movie, if I remember, if that was Hasbro as well. And
oh my god,
the connected universe thing is just such a pitfall for so many people.
Well, here's the thing though. Hasbro used to be Johnny on the spot. Hasbro with the original Transformer toys. It was like Hasbro was everything. But I think that's the problem in general, is over time, these companies have to figure out, how do we keep generating revenue? And so they keep trying to get ahead of the curve, keep trying to get ahead of the trend. And then they end up being these bad actors, if you will.
sure.
Because I remember when Hasbro it was just, well, they were the ones that made the Transformer toys. No one else was making them. And it was like, if I remember correctly, a lot of us really didn't hear of who Hasbro actually was until the Transformers started getting big in the 80s. And it was like, oh, Hasbro. Wow.
Yeah, right.
And these toys are awesome. You have a toy that turns into another toy.
But even
How
then,
cool is that?
I was born in '86, and so I missed like a lot of that.
Don't say that ever again. While I was a junior in high school, by the way.
I missed a lot of that, like that era. But I was like aware of Transformers as a kid, and those cartoons were commercials. They were there to make you think that these guys were cool to buy the toys. But even then, I was like not aware of Hasbro, right? It was like, oh, I want to go buy the Transformers. Where I think now, for better or worse, something like Disney is much more associated with Marvel, with Star Wars, with whatever else. Like Disney itself is a brand, and that was always, I guess, kind of true because Disney has always been a big juggernaut. But I feel like nowadays there is a degree to which the company that owns these intellectual properties or whatever else are as much a brand as the thing they're selling you, right? Where Hasbro now is sort of a brand and on top of Transformers and G.I. Joe and all the stuff that they try to sell you.
I think Hasbro was just trying to make sure they didn't get snuffed out. Because with Disney buying all these properties, Hasbro wanted to make sure, don't forget, we're still here and we still own the licensing. So, and we're not selling it. So you still have to acknowledge us. And I love that, even at the end of all those Transformer movies, even the ones that suck, and we can get into that later, you still see Hasbro.
Yep.
In the credits.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
which they have created their own production company called Allspark Productions or something like that to try and like hide the Hasbro thing. But then once you get to that opening credits, you see a Hasbro production in association with Allspark Productions. And I think it's very generous to say the Transformers movies, some of them suck. I mean, even the 2007 one is fun, but it's not great for many reasons. Key among them being Michael Bay's leering eye.
You mean blow everything up and kill everything, and then make
Megan
big
Fox really shiny and wearing as little clothes as possible for a movie
sure
geared towards
you
kids.
go up Megan Fox's butt at least twice.
2007 was we were all going through some stuff. It was a different time culturally.
But Matt, you did raise a really great point where prior to Disney making a lot of these acquisitions, kind of starting with Pixar, Disney was kind of the franchise, and every new production that they came out with was just like a new line of toys that they were creating, but like it was always Disney. And now it's kind of like Disney's fading a little bit to the background, where it's more about the IPs than it is about the mouse and the castle and everything. So I do find that a little interesting that Disney has modified their business model a little bit to be more of a background entity in terms of who is the face of the company, not so much where like during the Sleeping Beauty era, Little Mermaid era, our era, when we grew up with like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and everything, it was just like it was Disney.
Yeah, well,
Disney
like when we were younger, I don't know what it, I don't remember what it was like. If we ever talked about it, what it was like for you as a kid, Josh. But when I was a kid, before we even met, you would get those VHS tapes in the big puffy plastic cases, and those were Disney movies. Like they had this distinct style, and then lots of other companies tried to do that to try to capitalize on that like cachet, but in our house they were still, this is a DreamWorks movie or whatever, but it's a Disney movie, it's in the big puffy case. So like it was, we're going out to see the new Disney movie in this summer, The Lion King is this year, The Little Mermaid is next year. That's not how they came out, but you get what I mean.
Yeah. And then Pixar kind of came and added a little extra flair to that Disney stuff. But Leo, go ahead.
Oh, but the way I understand it, this was a calculated business plan. I mean, they're not stupid. They started pulling the name Disney from the forefront because there started to be a bad taste in the public's mouth for the name Disney. So they started pulling back a little bit, and they started purposely buying up all these IPs. I mean, for the love of God, Disney owns ABC.
Yep.
Who saw that coming? I mean, really, the American broadcasting.
That happened in the 90s. I remember they had like The Wonderful World of Disney. They had like a good partnership.
Every sitcom
it used to be Disney was trying to get their programs on these national networks, and now they're buying national networks and owning them. So this was a calculated, and I will say a very smart business move to start saying, we don't have to have our name in the forefront to to still be the ones that actually own all these properties. I mean, the Disney, you talk about a franchise juggernaut.
Yep.
Disney is just running the gamut on everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in terms of the modern Disney, and I'm not an expert here. I'm just someone who has noticed how this has happened. In the 90s, a new Disney movie comes out, it's the biggest hit of the year. And then as time went on into like the 2000s, those like traditionally animated movies kind of started to fall off a bit, partially because a couple of them they made were not very good. But Pixar started to come out and those kept hitting. So I think there's a period where Disney is like, what are we? Because the thing that we've made our bread and butter on for the last 2 decades is not working anymore. What are we going to do?
Being an animation studio.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I know we're focusing really heavily on Disney with this, but I mean, they own practically everything.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to. And like so many of the big franchises that I think that are in the conversation right now about fatigue happen to be Disney. Not all of them, but a lot of them are owned by Disney.
And we are going to transition a little bit into another conversation about studios kind of forcing things into IPs. But I did want to bring up the fact that with Disney, they weren't really well known for a lot of their live action stuff. I know they did have some things like Escape to Witch Mountain and
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Which
Mary Poppins.
Yeah, they had a really good track record for some live action stuff. They even, in the weird follow up to when Batman 89 came out, and like studios didn't think, oh, comic book movies are the thing. Pulp comics from the 40s are the thing. So they like studios just bought like Dick Tracy and The Rocketeer, and even The Rocketeer is still really good. But Disney made a weird transition where they were like, let's start remaking our animated features with like 101 Dalmatians starring Jeff Daniels and
Glenn Close.
And let's also start making movies based off of our rides as like some weird advertising campaign for Disney World and Disneyland. And they struck gold, no pun intended, with Pirates of the Caribbean. Amazingly fun movie that has no right to be as fun and good as it is.
And then they just... And I'm sorry, I just want to interject real quick because the conversation I thought we were going to have tonight, the Pirates of the Caribbean series, is another one of those. There's an exception to every rule for me. But go ahead.
Oh, man. I'm the exact opposite. It's only one of those movies is any good for me.
I think the fourth one is what the second one should have been, but it's still not very good either. It still kind of misses the point. But the 2 and 3
I love
and whatever,
every one of those movies.
And I can see where people enjoy them. I really do. But man, those movies missed for me big time. And I also have some bad memories about previous relationships that Matt's aware of with those movies.
Oh, it's personal. Okay.
Some of that too, yeah.
Those movies came out. I know we're getting off on, we're really focusing on a lot of stuff tonight and also getting off on a lot of tangents. Those movies came out in a time when like Josh and I were in like high school and just after, where it was like, it's Saturday, we're going to the movies, we're going to see whatever. I see you like wiping the face. I'm sorry to remind you how young we are.
If you want to feel younger, Leo, I was born when you were a sophomore. Just so you're aware.
Just keep Matt. Continue, please. Just finish this story, please.
Well, I remember we went like, I think Josh is the one who convinced me like, oh, this movie Pirates of the Caribbean. I think this was when you were in your Johnny Depp appreciation phase, which
yes, I grew out the goatee. Yeah, I had a black car that was a convertible that your neighbor Stephanie ended up dubbing the Black Pearl for me.
Yep. In retrospect, none of us could have known how regrettable that ended up being. Anyway, so I was like, I don't know, that looks silly. Let's not see it. And then we saw it, and I was like, oh, that was great. And then a couple of years later, I think it was the same situation. We were all still living in town, and we saw the second and third movies when they came out, and I was like, those were not very good.
Well, I'll give you my Pirates of the Caribbean history. So when I saw the first one, I was already watching some movies and shows with my sons at the time, and we kind of exhausted everything.
Yeah.
And my youngest boy especially was really into Star Wars. He still is to this day. And at the time, we ran out of stuff to watch. And then Pirates of the Caribbean came out and we saw it and we all loved it.
Yeah.
And so, I really did love that movie, but then for my kids to love it too is a big, that's a big bonus. So when the next one came out, I was hyped for it. And I was like, oh, we need to see the next one. Again, I loved it. I thought Davy Jones, man, I mean, it's just everything about this whole little series. Yeah, it's fun silliness.
Yeah, right.
I get it. But it's also a pretty, I thought the storylines were pretty great, pretty good. And even as deep as the storylines got at certain points, my kids could still follow it.
Sure.
So again,
Yeah.
another bonus. So as the next ones come out, they were, again, I will say they're not the best movies. They're not Shakespeare.
Hey, man.
I will tell you that.
Love what you
They're-
love. I'm not trying to tell
they're
you that you're
not
wrong.
Shakespeare. But I thought they were great movies. I thought Johnny Depp was perfectly cast as Jack Sparrow. No one else could ever do Jack Sparrow ever again, as far as I'm
and not
concerned.
to praise Johnny Depp 20 years later, given his current standings, but apparently that was him going rogue too. Like the studio did not want him to do the Keith Richards thing, and he's just like, I'm gonna do it.
Dude,
and
he's drunk. He's drunk
every
and
time they
stupid,
asked
but he's
him
the
to,
smartest one there.
every time they asked him to take off a tattoo or something, he would add a cap to his grin, and so okay, we'll find an equilibrium.
I would think if I would get down to the brass tacks of it all, it's just those grim pirate stories that sound so absolutely ridiculous if you heard them from old school pirates. But what if those stories were true? And that's all Pirates of the Caribbean is. It's like, what if those stories were actually true?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the movie, there is fun to be had in a lot of those movies, but there is franchise fatigue as well especially when you move Jack into the lead role instead of a supporting role from Will and Elizabeth.
I think what it got really ridiculous for me was when he died. That whole being with the
David Jones
crabs and
locker.
all that and blah blah blah. Okay, that dragged out far too long. But I was able to forgive that after a while once they got past it. Like, you guys spent too much money on that whole section of that movie.
Everyone loves Jack Sparrow. Let's throw 30 of them into one scene.
Yeah, that was too ridiculous. But let's talk about, when I was thinking about us getting together, talking about this, about franchise fatigue, I was thinking, what got me to this point anyway? Because, I talk to people about this all the time. I hate sequels. I think that's how we started this conversation, Josh.
Yep.
I was like, man, sequels are just so dumb to me. I hate when they just keep making sequels. But obviously, I don't hate all sequels. Otherwise, how could I possibly love all the Pirates of the Caribbean? So I started thinking, what made me this way to begin with? And, lately I've been doing a lot of mindfulness meditation, which, helps me focus on thinking about my thoughts and recognizing thoughts and what they are. So how did I get to the point where I started saying, man, sequels suck. I hate when they make a bunch of movies. So I was thinking back to movies I've seen and what would have gotten me to this point. And so I narrowed it down to a couple of them. And I think it's going to be either Rocky or Friday the 13th. And so to explain this, I still remember when the first Rocky came out. I still remember going to the theater to see it. And it was a great movie. I'm like, man, that was amazing. I remember that whole, how when a blockbuster movie happens and then there's the whole air and the society about, how, and it kind of reflects the movie, everyone's a champion. Everyone thinks about being an underdog and coming back. It was like, oh man, that was great. Great movie. Well, I think, then they were talking about making another one. They were going to make Rocky Part 2. And I think a lot of people forgot what happened at the end of Rocky, what Apollo Creed said to Rocky. He said, you got to give me a rematch. Of course, Rocky said, no, there ain't going to be no rematch. But then we know what happens, right? Okay, so they made Rocky 2. So it made sense. Seeing Rocky 2 made sense. Then they made a third one. Then it was like, okay, now what's he doing? Well, it's the same movie. Once again, it's the same story, this time with a Russian. Okay, same story. He gets beat up, but he comes back and wins, right? Rocky 4. What happens? He gets beat up and comes back and wins again. Right? It's the same thing
I was
over
staring
and
at
over,
him
right?
dumbfounded. I haven't
And
seen
I'm
it.
like, oh my gosh, why do they keep doing this?
Well,
And so
wasn't it Rocky? Was it Rocky 3 or Rocky 4 where he had the robot? That's where the difference is.
oh, it's a robot. So then I
Then
was thinking about
Rocky, the one with Drago. Drago's training with a robot, so like there's differences
They're mixing
there.
them up.
but it's the same story. And then I was thinking about, okay, well, because I love horror movies. And really, I think a lot of it came from my hatred of franchises, come from my love of horror, because I love a good horror story. But
Horror
then when they
movies,
take a good horror story and then they make these sequels,
run
they
into the
end
ground.
up making them trash.
Yeah.
And Friday the 13th, in my opinion, is the first, is a primary example of that. The first Friday the 13th was great. The story was great. It was twisted. Come to find out, it was because this kid and his mom and the camp and blah, blah, blah. And it was just this dude. And he came back for revenge, basically. It's a revenge story. If you look at the basis of Friday the 13th, it's just basically a revenge story. Then they made another one. And another one, and another one. And then they married him to Freddy, which I love the first Friday the 13th. And then they made too many of the
Nightmare on Elm Street, yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Then they made too many of those. Then they married him to Friday the 13th. And then there's Jason and Freddy in outer space and whatever. Then they married them to Predator.
Yep.
Why?
Yeah,
It's
horror movies might be the patient zero of anything we're talking about, or any for horror franchise.
It just becomes so ridiculous. So then I try to think, well, everyone always says, yeah, I know it's stupid, but it's just fun. Am I not fun? Am I not a fun person? Because I don't see what's fun in that.
That's
What's
a question.
fun in
That's a question for your priest or your doctor. I don't know.
Because I love some fun, stupid movies, but when it comes to these sequels upon sequel upon sequel upon sequel,
Yeah,
they just get too ridiculous.
Yeah.
Is my problem.
I get it.
And I think that's a great segue into what I really wanted to talk about today, which is this trend of studios needing to work scripts or IPs into scripts, because we have heard through the grapevine and other places and outlets that someone might have brought a really good script to a studio, so let's say Allspark Studios or Paramount, who is the owner of Hasbro, or I believe they have like a partnership. And they said, "Oh, that's a great script. Can we put Transformers in there?" You're like, how do you expect me to have this story of a medieval knight who knows Merlin and needs to save a dragon? How are we supposed to fit that into a Transformers movie? Like, we'll figure it out. Like, it's Michael Bay. He knows what he's doing.
First of all, he'll blow everything up. There'll be castles on fire and exploding.
And like, there's no,
That sounds
there's
rad,
no
honestly.
well, I mean, that's essentially the 5th Transformers movie.
I should see
there's
that
no
movie.
proof. There's no proof of that being an original script that they just worked into a Transformers movie. But if you watch it, it is very much that. Like, it's a story about a girl or a woman who is like the descendant of Merlin, and she has to discover the beauty of magic and save the world from an existential crisis. And then cue
Robots.
Michael Bay, and they throw in robots to work some Transformers storyline into that. Like, it's a nearly 3-hour movie that they could have just literally split apart and had 2 90-minute movies.
Why? That's what I always ask. Why? Why would you do this? I don't.
There's a degree to which I don't think this is new or recent in terms of like the past like few decades, right? Where I don't think it's a secret that if you put something out that has brand recognition, it'll sell, right? Like, it's a, you put,
It's a guaranteed merchandise seller at the very least.
you put
'cause you're
Spider-Man
getting
in,
new-
so many
Right,
people know who
that's-
Spider-Man is.
That's true. Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
But I also think like, especially in the last, let's say, I don't know, 10 years, as like, and, you know, I'm someone who likes a lot of Marvel stuff. I enjoy all that. I'm a comic book guy going from way back, so I watch all those movies. But I think when Marvel hits, and it really starts to hit when, like, you know, Iron Man comes out and it's a big hit, and then those movies keep coming out, and then you're like, okay, this Avengers thing is going to happen. I think, and maybe it's not, maybe there's more to it than that, but it feels like around that time is when a lot of studios really start playing it safe, really safe, where like everything's got to be a franchise, right? And then that continues, and like in more recent years, we've got trends of, you know, shows, movies getting sequels 20 years later. So I think there's just a real sense right now, for whatever reason, studios are just being really conservative about, oh, well, you know, we need to make a lot of money. And the way you make a lot of money is you shove something in there that people know about, or, you know, we make a movie
There's nostalgia for it.
Yeah, we make a movie that's tied to a brand.
Basically, play it safe with what we know already works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I think Marvel, and to a lesser degree, Star Wars, just because Star Wars has had less theatrical output.
Not for lack of trying in the last 10 years.
Sure, yeah. Has a lot to do with that, just because, you know, for a while everyone was trying to make their own Marvel. Like, you know, a few years ago.
Sony's still trying to do that. We have a Craven movie coming out.
Yeah, but even with stuff like Universal trying to tie all their monsters together in a universe for a while.
The Dark Universe. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so I think there's just like, in a couple of ways, Marvel is a watershed moment in a lot of where studios are like, that's what we need. So like lots of franchises and tie them together if you can.
And God help DC.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well,
please.
and like we were talking about Fast and Furious earlier, you know, that's a franchise that comes out, and the first movie is well received. The second movie less so, partially because Vin Diesel's not in it, and then I haven't seen the third one. Everyone hates it, from what I understand, or did at the time. And then a few years later, they come back as just like a bombastic, over-the-top action movie. Yeah, and they just keep escalating from there. And I don't know how that maps to, say, where Marvel was at that time. But it, you know, and that's
it appealed to a wide enough audience that it made money.
Right.
I think Fast and Furious 8 made over $1 billion. I think Fast and Furious 7 made over $1 billion.
Yeah,
so like,
and it's a bit different.
And I will, even though I've knocked Fast and Furious, I will give them props for they knew exactly how to zero in on that. They knew how to target their audience, because there is a specific demographic that repeatedly goes and sees those movies.
Yeah.
I'm not that demographic. I'm not even interested. I've saw, like I said, I saw the first one, and I think I watched half of the second one, and I was done. And then I'm like, I all I have to see is the commercials. I know I don't need to go see these movies anymore. But they're successful because they targeted their demographic, and they're good at it.
And in a lot of ways, Fast and Furious is almost like a kind of a modest example of this, right? Where like, I think they've had one, maybe two spin-off movies that are like, here's characters doing their own thing. It's not Fast and Furious, it's a different movie.
There are?
Yeah.
There's the Tokyo Drift, which is I think it has been like, it's been retconned as a third one. And then they did Hobbs and Shaw with The Rock and Jason Statham, which I think that bombed. So they're bringing Jason Statham back into this one, or maybe it's just that relationship between Vin Diesel and The Rock just soured so badly that Vin was can't even let him have it.
But either way, like, it's, you know, for the most part, it's one series of 10 movies, right? So that's a lot of movies, and that's a thing I never would have thought in 2001 when I saw the Fast and the Furious. I thought it was okay, but, you know, as opposed to something like Star Wars or Marvel, which again, we're harping on Disney a lot, but I think that when people talk about franchise fatigue, those are like the things they go to because they're the biggest. You know, you have these just interlocking parts that everyone feels like they have to keep up with, as opposed to, yeah, I'll see Fast 10 because that's the one movie. You know, the last one came out 3 years ago. I'm not having to watch, you know, Hobbs Origins on Paramount Plus or whatever. You know?
And you know, another franchise of movies that I can't help but mention is Rambo.
Sure.
I mean, I'm from the Rambo era, and it's like I remember when First Blood came out, and I was like, man, this is a great movie. Awesome.
Very good movie. That was, I think it got Stallone another screenwriting nomination, if I
Yeah, or something.
recall.
But then Rambo came out, Rambo 2, and I remember a lot of people didn't even know. I remember people not even knowing that First Blood even existed. And they were wondering, well, why is this called Rambo 2? And then they just went from there. And then it was just ridiculousness after that.
Ridiculous
You know?
action movie where a guy decides to go
Yeah.
back to Vietnam and re-win the war for the US.
And it became a joke. It even became a joke, but yet apparently they were still moderately successful because people kept going to see them. But I'm like, this is just garbage, and it's franchise garbage.
There's also a period where, you know, this might be something that you and I would remember more, Josh, but in the 90s and like the late 80s, there was a Rambo cartoon. There was a RoboCop cartoon. There was a
I remember
Toxic
the
Avenger
RoboCop
cartoon.
cartoon.
Like movies that are not for kids, but I guess were popular enough, or someone looked at that character enough and went, "Oh, I can make toys of that guy. Like I can make like
Absolutely.
RoboCop is a
Yeah.
guy that you can make toys out of. So you have to make it appeal to kids. So then you have the movie about the war traumatized Vietnam vet becomes a Saturday morning cartoon, but that has almost no bearing on what that movie was about.
And I
just
remember
before-
that era of when they kept trying to make everything, okay, this is the movie, but let's also make it for kids.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that time too. Yeah.
I remember just before there was that, I can't remember if it had to have been federal, but the government like put out some kind of law restricting studios from being able to advertise R-rated movies towards kids. And like just before that passed into law, Kenner just pushed out a shit ton of Aliens merchandise. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then my cousin showed me Aliens and I was just like, holy cow, this is violent. But I also grew up on RoboCop.
Right.
So like it was a really weird thing for me to be like, oh, RoboCop, this is fine. And even my mom was like, oh yeah, RoboCop, whatever. And then Aliens, my mom was like, no, you can't watch this because because a woman says bitch at one point to an alien. Like that was my mom's big sticking point, not the F-bombs and not the violence.
Well, I remember it started because, you know, we went from Saturday morning cartoons to after school cartoons, and they were just showing any and all commercials at any time of day.
Yep.
So it all started with, no, you can't show commercials for adult movies, quote unquote adult movies,
Rated R
right
movies.
after
R-rated
school
movies.
when kids are home watching after school programming. So that's how that all started.
Yeah, and then
You can't show RoboCop during DuckTales.
on the other side of the action hero coin, Matt and I we saw the fall of the Terminator franchise in almost real time. And that came out the same year as Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. I remember I skipped school one day and did a double feature and saw, or no, that was during the summer, so it wouldn't have been. I think maybe Matt was working or something, and I just went to the theaters on my own and did a double feature. Saw Terminator, what was the third one? Rise of the Machines, and then Curse of the Black Pearl right after. And I just remember like hating Terminator 3 and to what you had said, Leo, where it had just become like a parody of itself. And Arnold's walking around in like bedazzled glasses from a strip club that he broke into and doing a talk to the hand. And
Talk to the hand. Oh my
and
gosh.
just the parody that these movies become so quickly. And to your point about horror movies, like they become self-parodying at some point because they have nothing else to give. And because they've run every other storyline to the ground. Like how many times can you tell the story of a guy who breaks into kids' dreams and kills them in their dreams?
I mean, Michael Myers, back to Friday the 13th, he was just a dude. It was just some guy.
Michael Myers was Halloween. Jason.
I mean,
Voorhees.
Halloween, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was just some guy who was going on a vengeful killing spree. It's a slasher movie. Okay, scary, whatever. If you want, I've never been scared of slashers, really. I mean, if you come at me with a knife, it's not going to end well for you. But anyway, that's what it was, right? And it was scary to some people, but then it just went too far.
It became part of like it was a mystical thing with him, even though it originally was just like Laurie Strode's maybe brother, who was just like out for revenge one night, and it went to a point where it just made no sense at all, and they didn't care about continuity. They just cared about telling a story, which maybe that's one of those things where they kept getting a script and like, oh, this would make a good Halloween script. We can
How
just
much money can we make off of it?
Well, this
Yeah,
is something,
exactly.
this, I think something that is that kind of dovetails into a lot of what we've been talking about, and is also an example of something where this has been going on for forever, right? Is almost literally every single Die Hard movie, right? Where,
Mm.
If I'm remembering this specifically correctly, Die Hard is originally, it's adapted from like a book or something, right?
Yep.
And I think almost every successive sequel, well, the second and third ones, are other movie scripts for action movies that they were like, oh, we should make this a Die Hard movie because we can kind of
that's
squint
right, yeah.
and see it. And I think that changes once they come back for 4 and 5 years later, where they're like, this is just a bombastic action movie that we decided to put Bruce Willis in.
Mm-hmm.
But that's an example of, we have this really popular movie, we want to do a sequel of it, someone's got a script that's adapting a different kind of movie. Oh, let's make that a sequel, even though that's not what the script is. That's not what they're going for. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie necessarily, but, and I don't think I've actually ever seen Die Hard 2, so maybe it is a bad movie. I don't know, but it's just an example of, hey, studio is going to go where they think the money's going to be made.
Yep.
And I think a quintessential example of that is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Amazing movie. It's a great movie, but guess what? It flopped horribly.
Yeah.
Why? Because it had nothing to do with the Halloween franchise.
Because they originally are like, this should be, it's not, Halloween
it's
is not
about
a
the
franchise.
Mask. Yeah.
It's
but
about, sorry, go ahead.
They threw the Halloween franchise tag on there, hoping to just capitalize on that. It's a great movie. It's a great script. It's a great story, but it had nothing to do with the rest of the Halloween franchise.
Sure.
So a lot of people went and they were like, wait a minute. This has nothing to do with Michael Myers. What is going on? He wasn't even in it. He wasn't even mentioned. Had nothing to do with him at all. Had nothing to do with that story at all. But like you said, I think it was a bunch of studio executives said, yeah, this is a great movie, but let's market it to Halloween.
Yeah.
So we can capitalize on that.
Because Halloween can be a brand that is, it's not,
Right.
It's not the attack of Michael Myers. It's Halloween. So you can just do a different kind of movie under that umbrella. And, they tried it, didn't work. So they go back to Michael Myers.
And a quick unpopular opinion I've learned over the years. I don't believe that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm right there with you.
That's not a Christmas
It's a movie that
movie
takes place at Christmas. There's a difference.
But that doesn't make it a Christmas.
Yeah, there's a
movie,
difference. There's a distinction.
I'm not saying it's a bad movie. It's a good movie. I like Die Hard. I like the first Die Hard. I really like that movie, but it's not a Christmas movie.
No, definitely not. And on that moment of agreement, we could talk about this subject all night, but we've all got places to be. Matt's got a baby that's probably crying somewhere, hopefully in his house.
I hope so.
I think something that I'm coming away with, and it's a very different conversation than I expected to have tonight, which is great. We've been running franchises into the ground since the dawn of time.
Yep.
John Carter of Mars is a great one. It didn't even get a franchise until 2012, and even then, because that was supposed to be like the first original or first feature-length animated movie. Warner Brothers was trying to beat Disney to getting a feature-length animated movie out, and they were going to adapt John Carter of Mars, and they couldn't figure out how to adapt it, and it took almost 100 years to adapt that franchise, and they still ran it to the ground.
It's
and then I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
did you even like the movie? What
Did
you
anybody?
think?
I don't think
John
anybody did.
Carter. I watched it for the first time in my in-laws RV while we were touring the country,
Hmm.
and I thought
Not
it was
the ideal way to
fine.
watch
I
it.
didn't.
Or maybe the
Yeah,
ideal
on
way
a
to watch
tablet,
it.
on a tablet with the kids running around screaming while you're getting a little car sick. Yeah, it's a great time. I thought it was fine. I thought it was extraordinarily average. Oh,
Yeah.
and I know I'm trying to wrap up here, but I just remembered going back to the Fast and the Furious franchise. Leo, you made a great point about how they know what they are, and people seem to enjoy it, and they keep hitting those points that people want to see with them, and it just keeps being successful for them. And I feel like that's kind of what happened with Mario. I don't know if either of you have seen the Mario movie.
Not yet, no.
It to me,
Not yet.
it's very average. It's fun if you obviously most of us have played Mario, grown up on Mario, if not all of us here. But it hits those Mario points, and I think that's where people are loving it. Is it's hitting that nostalgia factor. But if you look at it for as a cinematic movie telling a story, it's a nothing burger. It does what it needs to do, and it's fine. But without it being a Mario movie and all the Mario sprinkles spattered on top, it's just a vanilla cupcake that tastes like vanilla.
And it's going to
You're
spawn
the
30
second
sequels.
movie reviewer who I respect who has said the exact same thing.
And it's going to spawn 30
Verbatim.
sequels.
Yeah.
It's going
Yeah, it's going to
be,
spawn. It's going to get at least 2 sequels
I
and
doubt
make a
it.
bunch of memes.
It's made like
and
$400 million at this point. It's a huge
It's the
hit.
biggest opening for a feature.
I think that's
animated
another
movie.
conversation we need to have.
Let's-
These opening weekend numbers, I think, are not. I don't think those matter anymore.
No,
No,
you don't think so?
without taking inflation into account and everything.
Yeah.
Plus, you have a lot of extra markers with like how many 3D showings were there and how many IMAX.
Yeah,
showings
what's
were
the
there.
long run? What's your long run? Sure, you made $400 million the first opening weekend, and then what happens after that?
Sure.
What about subsequent weekends, months, years?
Mhm.
No one sees it after that. So you make all your money up front, and see, to me, that's not successful.
That's a good point because we just watched a man have a mental breakdown in real time when his movie Shazam 2 came out and had a massive decline in the second and third weekends. And
Yeah.
Zachary Levi, star of that movie, I haven't seen it. Maybe it's good. I don't know.
It's
Um,
absolutely
okay.
It's
It's
okay.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine.
This man, Chuck from TV's Chuck, just did not have anyone who loves him enough to take his phone away. So he just keeps getting on
Where's
video.
Yvonne Strahovski when he needs her?
Yeah, keeps getting on video and begging people to see his movie. No one saw
But
this
is that the
weekend.
new model for movies, though? Because, okay, we know everyone, was anticipating Avatar 2, right? Had a huge opening weekend, right? How's it doing now?
It's
What's
made
that?
over $2 billion globally.
Okay. So, like, by the time we wrap up this weekend, what will it be? That's what I'm saying. What's
Right.
what's the
What's-
ongoing?
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
long tail
Well,
of it? Yeah.
Avatar. James Cameron knows how and when to release
James
a movie.
Cameron is the Jesus of movies. So let's just go ahead and call it.
I'm not saying that. Like, I haven't seen Avatar 2 yet as of this recording.
I haven't either. My
like,
son watched it. He was like, "Oh, it's great." My daughter saw it. They were like, "Yeah, it's great. It's great." Now, I have a bit of a confession. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. When the first Avatar came out, there was so much hype. I was like, "Yeah, I'll see it. I'll see it." I saw it at home. Like I got the rental when it came out,
The way James
and
Cameron intended.
and I was like, I stopped it. I was like, I'll get back to this. And I
Never did.
never did until last year. Because it was good, but I was like, it's okay. I thought it was kind of boring, especially towards the middle.
Sure.
And there was all this hype about it. I was like, yeah, it's great. It's beautiful. It's a pretty movie. Yeah, I'll give it all
That's
that.
the point.
But the story I thought was, it just didn't hold my interest.
Avatar
So
is
when
a
I
great. Sorry,
Go
go ahead. I cut you off.
No, you go ahead. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say Avatar is a great example of a series where I feel exactly your philosophy about it, where like that movie came out. I saw it in theaters. It was like it's a beautiful set piece, wonderful showcase, and I forgot about it. And I feel like that was the consensus on that movie for a decade. And
Yeah.
then Avatar 2 comes out and everyone's like, this is such a beautiful touching movie, and it's like it's saving cinema. And I was like, motherfucker, 2 years ago you couldn't even tell me Jake Sully's name.
Right. And now they're saying it's the movie, it's the sequel everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, I watched that movie and I heard that sequel was coming out, and I was like, I don't need to see that. I saw that already. I pulled a Leo Allen.
It's a lot. From what I've heard, it is a lot of the same stuff. They add some tweaks to it, but it does touch on a lot of the same stuff just by changing focus from Jake to his kids. So like instead of Jake learning the way of the Na'vi, it's his kids learning the way of the Water Tribe. And I mean,
And there'll be 3 more of them, right?
Yeah,
yeah, he got the
he got the
permission
money.
slip
Yeah,
to
he
get-
made the money.
Again, the
Everyone's-
Jesus of movie production.
Everyone's favorite character, Jake Sully.
Hey, I'll give I give Cameron his props.
Yeah, he
I'm-
knows how to make money. He knows when to
Yeah,
release his movies, and they have.
Well,
to have
and I mean,
legs.
you know, I haven't seen Avatar 2. I can't talk too much shit about it, aside from that I have no interest. It's not like the man can't make a good movie, right? Like
True that.
Terminator 2.
Yep.
We have a really great episode where Alex and Justin talk about James Cameron's filmography and just a lot of stuff. So if you haven't listened to that one came out. That is also our Avatar 2 review episode, I believe. So go back to
If I
December.
haven't listened to it. You're not talking to me, are you? Yeah, you're talking
I'm
to the
talking to
people-
our listeners, 'cause
the
obviously you
listeners.
have-
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Obviously, you have, Leo. You're like our one person in Ohio that listens to us.
Yeah, maybe I should go listen
I'm
to
that
it.
blip on the map. Yes, I listen religiously.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
yeah, if you have someone in Wisconsin who listens, it's not me. I'll tell you that much.
Well, that's because you live in Minnesota, Matt. Like, what are you throwing Wisconsin out there for? No.
Wisconsin, Minnesota, same difference, right?
When I was in high school and I was trying to be edgy and funny, I had a really bad joke where it's like, what's the difference between a Canadian and a Minnesota? In Minnesota, they say don't chano, and in Canada, they say a.
Yeah, it really killed. He was very popular.
It was real good. Yep. Thank you, Leo. With that horrible joke and admission of my stupid youth, let's get out of here. You can follow me on Twitter at Josh_Scar. You can follow the podcast at Talking Smack Pod. Matt, please tell everyone about our Discord and how wonderful it is.
Our Discord rules. If you like what happened here tonight, which is mostly me just stream of consciousness, unhinged rants, if you want to see that in text form, almost exclusively, join our Discord. It's happening all the time. Literally anything. You give me any kind of prompt, paragraphs of just whatever I'm thinking. It's a fun time, and we could use more people. So come on over.
And this is nice because you are here. Thank you to Leo Allen for our musical themes. Thank you to Beppo for our original avatars. Thank you to Retro Oil Studios for our Ricky avatar. Please like, subscribe, rate, review on your podcatcher of choice. Leo, please tell everyone where they can find you if you would care to share your socials. I can edit if needed.
Well, I tell you what, I'm not really active as much on social media. Is Twitter still alive? What's going
Barely.
on?
It's technically
Is there
still
hard support?
breathing. Yeah.
I mean, I heard PBS left, NPR left because he pissed them off.
Yep.
Whatever. Yeah, I'm not even there at all anymore. But I tell you what, you can still catch, if you never checked out Voluntary Input, it's still out there. You can still catch Voluntary Input, the podcast. You can still go to the YouTube channel and catch all the videos. And hey, who knows what the future holds?
Ooh.
You never know. There may be some things in the works.
That sounds like a perfect
know-
sequel tease.
The franchise continues.
Oh, that's a great nickname for you, Leo, the franchise.
The
But I tell you what,
franchise
I'm always trying to, I still try to stay creatively active. I do have, before I was doing podcasting, before I was doing a lot of things, I was always active in music. If you go to YouTube and search Profound Simplicity, if you go to youtube.com at Profound Simplicity, you can find some of the new music I've been composing and throwing out there. A lot of it is just some, me making some creative mental releases. Let's put it that way. There's a few videos I've put together there and a lot of music. So there's that. So That's me for now. How about that?
Well, we'll put links in the episode description as well so people can find it. But again, Leo, thank you so much for having been here. This has been a blast. I'm glad we could bring you out of your podcasting hiatus.
Thanks
And,
for having me, Josh. It was been great. This was great.
Yeah, it was fun.
Matt, thank you for taking the time. And everyone, thank you again for taking the time to listen to this. I hope you enjoyed it. And maybe we'll have a sequel. Who knows?
Who knows?
I would love to have Leo back. He is a great talk. And again, check out Voluntary Input because Leo is one of my favorite interviewers out there. He gets some great stories. But with that, thanks again for listening and take care.
Watch Star Trek so they can make a sequel.
Watch Picard.
Season 3 is pretty good, I'll say that.
I like Lower Decks.
Boo.
My man said he was going to make some enemies, and he did it. He did it in the home stretch. Listen, we love Leo. Don't listen to him, though. Watch Star Trek. Watch Lower Decks.
I made Matt have a stroke.
Who loves T-Smack?
I love T-Smack. Is it true? Mm-hmm. I do. Ooh.